Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Derek Shulman. Derek, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you, Michael. It's nice to see you and hear you in person, or comparatively in person, in 2D at least.
There you go. The digital version of me.
Yeah, and me too.
And you. Well, tell you what, Derek, you have had a truly amazing career, both as an artist, and as a record exec, and all the things that you did along the way, all the people that you met along the way, makes for a really interesting story.
Yes, that's true. I mean, yes, okay. I'm not going to deny that I've met some
Well, you
truly
can't.
interesting people. No, I pretty much met them all. In fact, tomorrow, in a just a sidebar that you're talking about, the BBC are coming over to my office to discuss. There's going to be a series called The Frontmen, and I'm going to be talking about John Bon Jovi, who I discovered, and the guys in Kiss, who I had, Gene and Paul, who I worked with, and who else are they going to be talking? Ozzy, of course, Ozzy Osbourne, who in fact was managed. This Black Sabbath was managed by the same management as my group when I was on the musician side of the business, if you like, not the dark side, not the Darth Vader side. Not
one of those suits.
Well, actually, I did wear a suit ultimately when I was running ATCO, and that I looked in the mirror, scared the shit out of me. So, anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, your journey had to start someplace. Now, I'm going to guess that seeing as you were in, both of your bands, all three, if you count the Moles, with your brothers. So I'm going to guess it was a musical household.
100%, of course. Yeah, my father was a professional musician. He was the leader of they call it dance band back in those days. But in fact, his love was jazz, modern jazz and classical music. So yes, it was a house full of music and really, actually, when I think back, I thought that's what a normal household was. It was, the musicians would come and go after his gigs. He would come home at 12 or 1 in the morning and bring home his buddies and jam in the house until 4 or 5 in the morning. And somebody said it must have been a bohemian lifestyle. And I never thought I never thought that was just the life I was raised with. But certainly music was always around. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So
now the thing that amazes me, Derek, in listening to the Simon Dupree albums is the fact that how mature your vocals were for how young you were. When you guys, were doing Simon Dupree, how old were you?
Boy, that's a good question. I think I started the group when I was 15 or something, or 16 or 15 or 16, and Ray was 14. And we started it, and I ultimately dragged my elder brother, who's 10 years older than me, to be in the band because he could pay for a van, and he was a teacher. So we started when I was 16, and we had our first very big hit when I was just about to leave school, supposedly to go to university, which I never wanted to do, when I was 18. So really, I was, we were young kids. When I reflect back at it, young kids, but it was a whole different era and a whole different period of time, but certainly in England anyway. So that was, right. I was 15 or 16 when I started.
So you're a teenager, you're on top of the pops.
Yep.
That had to be quite an amazing experience. What was that like when you're that young and you're on such a major platform?
You want the honest truth?
Yes.
It was great. What can I tell you? And in fact, as I said to you, I was still at school, believe it or not, and I related a story to someone a couple of weeks ago about the career master. I was an all boys grammar school. I don't know if any of your listeners and viewers know about that. You know, this is a school where the teachers wore mortarboards and cloaks, and it's all boys, and you had to get a scholarship to get in. You know, it's kind of elitist school, and when I was about 14, I believe, the career teacher came in to try the streamers, and my buddies and say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a scientist, I want to be an astronaut, God knows. And I remember saying, I'm going to be a pop star. And the career master said, don't be stupid, and everyone laughed. And a couple of 3 or 4 years later, I was believe it or not, literally, I was signing the teacher's autograph when I was leaving school. They were asking me for my autograph.
That had to feel pretty good.
Yeah, a bit of Schadenfreude, if you like, Schadenfreude, you know. So yeah, it was good. It was fun, and it was good to have that. But ultimately, if you won the story, that became. I mean, we were a very hard-working and very popular band. This is my first band, but the pop world was very stultifying. It was really became a millstone around the band's neck to start playing these pop venues with people eating scampi and chips and waiting for the hits, and we just couldn't grow. That was the sort of the start of the beginning of the end, and the end of the beginning of my career, and going forward into being a musician in the next band I was in, which was Gentle Giant, of course.
Right. Well, tell me this to digress for a moment. So when you're that young, with your band, you haven't had a whole lot of time for, influences, if you will. Generally speaking, you growing up in a musical household is obviously different. Who were your big influences musically?
Actually, during that period of time, and I'll say this about being in the UK and living, I think in certain respects, I was very lucky in being in the UK in the 60s. And there was this incredible creative boom where all these classic rock, and pop and musicians came from, and we're talking about the Stones, the Beatles, Purple, Zeppelin, et cetera, et cetera. What we used to do, and I'm part of that world, was listen to the radio and listen to American music. There was a radio station called American Forces Network, which is piped from, I don't know where, but it was piped to the troops in Germany, American troops in Germany, and another station called Radio Luxembourg. And we all used to come home from school and listen to this amazing blues music and Stax and soul and R&B. And this is American music piped to England. And I don't think many Americans even heard this music. It was basically piped to the African-American audience who were stationed, who were soldiers and based in Europe. So that's what that's what I used to listen to, and say, wow, listen to this fantastic, music that's coming out of, there's these these networks, and we used to, then we pick up a guitar and say, let me try these, try these songs out especially blues and R&B. So that's really the first. I mean, I was influenced, of course, by my home, my existence at home, jazz and classical. But certainly, I loved R&B and soul. I mean, that was something I just listened to, and everyone did, actually. Every kid who was interested in music would sit by their radio and listen to American music coming from Germany.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, Derek. You mentioned Stax, which is one of my favorites. Yeah, there is. What are some of your favorite records, or songs, artists, what have you, that were on the Stax label back around that time?
I can't remember who was on Stax, but certainly I think Set was Stanford on Stax. I'm, oh boy, yeah. And the label, I just remember them saying Stax, Motown,
Uh-huh.
Chess, etc. So I mean, I just honestly, I just remember Joe Tex, um,
Eddie Floyd,
Eddie
Booker
Floyd. Yeah,
T.
exactly. But because he was a huge influence. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the classics. Yeah, all of the above, and my first group, and all mostly bands of our era used to listen to that music, and we couldn't get hold of the records because they were American, and listen to them and listen to them and pick up a guitar and try and pick up the chords and play the British version of American music. So pretty much most bands, and I would say bands that became massive in the rock world, if you like, I'm talking about the Zeppelins and Beatles and Stones, would do this very same thing and put their whatever they listen to, put their style into American sounding music. All of these bands, including the Beatles, of course.
Right. So it was
So yeah.
so is
No,
that
go
the
ahead.
Armed Forces Radio is what was one of the big impetuses, if you will, on the British invasion bands and
Absolutely.
sound.
100%. I would say 100%. It was a major, major influence, as well as the cultural and social influences which were going on at the time. I mean, this is a 60s in England was a period of getting out of from the Second World War, this grey period in the 50s. And there was a whole boom of optimism, if you like, and this is part of it. And teenagers and young kids like myself, we were going to do something different to our parents and grandparents. So, to be a pop star, as I said, was people laughed at it, but to hell with them. I was going to do it.
And you proved them right. You proved that you were right.
Well, yeah, I guess so for a while, for a period of time, and then
Yeah.
Gentle Giant came along, and then I became the anti-pop star.
Well, tell you what, you had mentioned, all the bands, what have you. Now I've heard a lot of stories through the years about the Blue Boar. What,
Absolutely.
yeah, tell us about the Blue Boar and what that was like and everything about that.
Interesting you should say this because I'm working with a couple of other people, well-known directors and producers, to do a documentary about the Blue Boar. I don't know how you know about it, but the Blue Boar was this cafe. I mean, cafe slash diner on the one piece of it was called motorway. This on the M1, which is a stretch of non-stop double freeway for groups going south to north. And in the mid 60s, all of the groups, including all the bands that we all know about, would travel up north. We're talking about northern England, from London to Newcastle, or bands from north would travel down south. But after the shows, you'd make a beeline for this one place which is open, like 1 or 2 in the morning, and you'd go hang with all these bands that had done gigs, in the Midlands, in the north of England, or the south of England, and you'd be sure to see your buddies, who I'd go see. Hey, the Move were there, or Amen Corner, or the Yardbirds, and how was your gig tonight? That was shitty. I mean, how was yours? That was good. So we all make friends in this cafe, which served baked beans on toast with a bag on top, or chips and chips and bacon sandwiches. And at the same time, a truckers were next to us. That was the only place open, literally in the middle of England, that would still be open all night. And it was a really iconic place. And in fact, a lot of bands that you know about, we were talking about Cream, et cetera, were formed by these kind of meetings, just hanging out in the cafe in the middle of the night after shows. A fantastic period.
What are some of your memories of that, of things that you saw?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just trying to think. I actually seeing America. I mean, we toured. This is my first group. Touring. Gene Pitney was the headliner, and Status Quo were were on the bill, and we were the second. We were probably popular. Simon Dupree, and in I'm trying to think who was it? The American. No, it wasn't Gene Vincent. Anyway, so I can't remember who it was, but it's a black musician. I'm trying to think, an African American musician. It wasn't. It was one of those touring musicians that came in with the English backing band. Damn it. Anyway, just to see an American musician come in with friends in the Mike Cotton sound, who had Terry Reid as a singer. It wasn't open. It was something like Otis Redding or Wilson Pickett, either one. And we said, man, look who's here. I mean, Hendrix actually, there's a story about this place. Jimi Hendrix, before he came over, thought it was actually a venue. He said, I've got to go play the Blue Boar. And he came over. We actually played with Hendrix in Germany. We did a tour with him. But yeah, there was, when you saw the American musicians come in, it was amazing. Wow, look who's here. We're not worthy, and they didn't know what the hell is going on.
That's amazing that you would have all of that history, if you will, taking place in a location that you would, on the surface, never expect to have that type of, patron.
It was absolutely amazing place and amazing place only because it was the only place where you could see your buddies in other groups and talk to them about their shows, where they were. And in those days, you could actually play 12 shows a week. I'm not kidding. I mean, wow. you could do 3 shows in one night, and we did. And most bands of that era did. And you became either good, or if you didn't become good, you become a plumber or a carpenter or street cleaner, whatever it was.
Right.
So that was a kind of almost like a apprenticeship of being in a group. Wow. So it was a fantastic period.
Yeah. Now, getting back to Simon Dupree, you had all the hits, but you also had a couple of well-known keyboard players that spent time with you guys as well.
Well, yeah, one in particular, was I think you're referring to Reg Dwight.
Yep.
Elton. He was actually a sub. He subbed for our real keyboard player Eric, because Eric had a pretty bad case of glandular fever. So we asked Reg at that time to come fill in, and he became a sort of semi-permanent member. And me and my brother Ray became good friends with him. I mean, we were, and when he met Bernie, we were around at that time. He was actually very encouraging because he said, I kind of like told him, that was towards the end of the group, that we were thinking of breaking up and doing something completely different. And he said, man, I'd love to be, if you're thinking about doing something different, I'd love to be a part of that if you're thinking about it. And we said, well, why not? If you're a great player. And we went up to his house in, it wasn't Watford, wherever it was, and we hang out. And then he'd met Bernie, and played songs like Skyline Pigeon. I'm not sure if your song was part of it. And me and Ray went home to Portsmouth, where we lived, which is about 50 miles south of Watford. And we said, it's not going to work for us. So we had to let him down gently. Thank God for him.
I would say, I think it worked out okay for him.
Oh, no shit, because 2 years later, and then they told us he was going to change his name to Elton John, and we just cracked up and said that will never work. Of course.
You should probably avoid the psychic business.
Absolutely, I'm completely off base on that one. So 2 years later, he was already headlining arenas, and we were scrambling to get gigs. So again, thank goodness that we turned him down. But we still remain friends for we still to this day. I mean, we get in touch from time to time. And he went through a lot of stuff, but now he's a very happy camper, and I'm very happy for him.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I had read that Dudley Moore had actually played on a couple sessions with you guys as well. Is that true?
Yeah, Dudley was great. Yeah. Yes, he was the pianist for a couple of singles, and what a great guy. I mean, this is really fun, hilarious, guy that was he didn't actually tour with us, but he played on a couple of singles that we put together. They were I didn't like. I mean, when I hear him, I kind of cringe. No, but a great guy, and someone who was a friend. We go out to a pub, and he drink along with us and say, yeah, a good buddy. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know that Dudley Moore was a brilliant keyboard player, by the way. I mean,
oh
really,
yeah, absolutely,
really superb keyboard player. I mean, we're talking about classical jazz and everything, as well as being a funny guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing that he couldn't do.
No, absolutely not. He's known to be a comedian, but his musical skills were superb.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned that you were wanting to go in a different direction. Is that what led to the Moles?
The Moles. That was that was actually in some ways, yes, it was. It was something that we put together kind of anonymously, as and EMI gave us studio time, and it was just me and my brothers. I mean, it was just us to express ourselves in a way that Simon Dupree and the Big Sound couldn't do, and we figured, let's put that record out and see what the reaction is, and the reaction was great, because we were starting to we were starting to get antsy about the kind of audiences we were bringing in, because these audiences wanted to scream and hear the hits, and we loved to play the hits. We wanted to expand our universe, if you like, and so that was, I guess, in certain respects the beginning of trying to expand it without sort of soiling the name of Simon Dupree. So
right.
So we put a record out called We Are the Moles, and boy, it started hitting the charts in a pretty big way. And people thought it was the Beatles. People thought it was who was the band, and how cool is this? And then a gentleman called Syd Barrett, who was in a competing band called Pink Floyd.
You may have heard of him.
He was in the studio at the time, and he saw us. He saw it was us. We were putting it together, and he was doing interviews with the press, and he spilled the beans on us, and basically deflated the balloon, which which is in retrospect probably the right thing to do. But we were pissed off at the time. Syd Barrett. Well, what's it got to do with you, man? At that time, by the way, Pink Floyd they made great records, but when they first started, we were there, and they were the first group ever to get an advance of some kind from any record label. But when they started, we did some gigs with them. They weren't very good, by the way. They were loud as hell, but not good.
You got to be good at something.
They were loud, that's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, you mentioned, winding things down, and obviously this leads to Gentle Giant. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to guess, given that huge jump that you did, that this was not a situation where you got together a focus group and found that people were saying, you know what, we want medieval style vocals in a rock song. How did you guys come to make that turn from Simon Dupree to Gentle Giant?
Well, as I said before, it was very stymieing to continue to be in this world where you had to make singles, and if they didn't make the charts, then you had to do another single and see if it hit the charts. And the audience that were coming in were, again, it's called the championship circuit, where you get good money. I mean, you certainly weren't starving, but it was really, you were really kind of stuck in it was a millstone around our necks. And I started becoming very, very depressed about being in that world. And basically said to Ray, my brothers, let's stop it now. Let's do something different. We didn't know what, but we wanted to do something completely different. And at that point, in the very 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 late 60s, or very early 70s, there was a whole movement going on, that you could smell and touch and taste. And thankfully, we had a manager that who believed in us as musicians. I'm talking about me and Ray and even Phil, and said that, okay, we're going to break the band up, and would you be prepared to fund, be a patron, if you like, to put a new band together? And in fact, this manager, Jerry Braun, did in fact believe in us, and so we took about 6 to 9 months off, to write brand new material and recruit new players for a new band. And we had no idea what direction we were going to go, but we had an idea that we did not want to go back to where we were. I mean, that was absolutely categorical. We wanted to do something completely different, and something which became Gentle Giant. We didn't know what it was going to be. It depended on who we recruited and what their influences were. But we were certainly wanted to put the past behind us and put and make the future something which was a little more expansive for all of us.
Well, I think you succeeded.
Apparently so, because we're still talking about it, 40 odd years later, after the band even broke up. So it's
right.
It's really very, it's quite gratifying actually that the music is still, I'll say, relevant, whatever that means. So yeah, we were recruited. I mean, for the first recruitment, it was in fact the most important one was Kerry Minnear, a keyboard player, who had just graduated from the Royal Academy of Music with a degree in composition and percussion. And basically, he was a real influence on us, and we were on him. And I think that Kerry's involvement was absolutely it was singular and central to the development of where Gentle Giant went. And then we found Gary Green, after I don't know how many guitarists. I mean, 250 guitarists, and he was probably the first one to ask if he could tune up. So wow, he wanted to tune up. How about that? So I mean, that was almost like a green light in itself.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the thing that strikes me with Gentle Giant is that it was one of those situations where, well, I mean, the chemistry between the members is key. But it seemed like you guys all really fed off of each other's divergent musical tastes and influences to create something new.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, we all came from different kinds of backgrounds. Even my brothers, Ray was classically trained on the violin, and it was, he had years of classical training, and in fact was going to be recruited for the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain. So his world, was more classical than perhaps mine and Phil's. I loved soul, I loved R&B. I wasn't classically trained, but I was, I certainly, I read music from playing the sax. Phil was older. He's 10 years older, and his love was modern jazz. Bebop and Charlie Parker, Chet Baker, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking
right.
Stan Getz. So his world was very much influenced by modern jazz. Mine more R&B and soul, but also, and at the same time, our house is full of jazz and classical. And then Kerry's world was much more classical. Gary's was blues, and again, all these. And then we went through a couple of drummers, and then John came through. John Weathers was the sort of glue as a drummer to come through as the as our main drummer. His world was much more, was very straight ahead R&B and rock, and a great rock drummer. I've said this before, if it's redundant, please tell me. But it is like a stew, and you stir it up, and then put this whole melding of like musical influences in a funnel, and out drips Gentle Giant. We're the stuff that drips out of the bottom.
There's an understated way to say it.
What can I tell you?
I'll tell you, the first two Gentle Giant albums were produced by Tony Visconti. How did Tony get brought in to work with you guys?
Tony was recruited by our manager, actually, and but we got along incredibly well with Tony. He was a real, muso, and a real fan. I mean, we played him the music we've written, and he loved it. I mean, he was a friend and a fan, and in fact, such a fan that when we, again, London was about 50, 60 miles from where we lived, and he let us sleep on his floor when we were taking days over in London, in Putney. And Tony is a great musician as well. So he was very, very much involved in the first album, especially. I mean, his chops were fantastic. At the same time, it was a big learning experience for us too. Ray and myself, especially, being in the studio and learning about how those knobs were twiddled. It's funny because at the very same time that he was doing our album, he was doing The Man Who Sold the World with Bowie and T-Rex, doing sessions, and we got to know all these guys. They were ready for their session, and we'd be finishing our sessions, and it was a period of incredible creativity, both in the studio and personally. And then the other studio in Trident, we'd see Roy Baker, being the tape op for the Queen, and Roy was Roy Thomas Baker. Everyone said Roy was Get the Tea Baker at that point. Hey Roy, get the tea.
Well, that eventually changed, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that's what he did. So good for Roy. But that was those days were certainly we were all novices. We didn't know what things were going to be. But Tony was very very much involved in putting that first album together. And in fact, the cover, just as a point of reference, was drawn by George Underwood, and George was Bowie's best friend, and he recommended by Tony because he knew Tony, because Tony knew Bowie, and George was always hanging out with Bowie because he was doing his album there as well. So all this stuff is intertwined in the history of British rock, if you like.
It always amazes me in those situations where things that you wouldn't automatically assume would be associated, but are.
Yeah. They were all part and parcel of that period of time. It was an incredibly creative and just a wonderful time to be a musician in England at that point. So Tony did the first album, very intrinsic in that, and taught us a great deal. On the second album, Acquiring the Taste, he was also the producer, but I think he saw that we were, especially Ray and myself to a certain degree, and wanted to get involved more with the knob twiddling, if you like. And he allowed us to sort of jump over his shoulders occasionally and twiddle a knob and sit back and as a mentor, he was fantastic. He helped us develop our skills musically as well as production wise on the second album, Acquiring the Taste. So yes, on the first two, and then from then on, we decided to produce ourselves. So I tip my hat to Tony for being a mentor, if you like, for teaching us how to, whatever producing means, and more, and especially Ray, my brother, and myself and Kerry, all of us actually were involved in this.
Well, one of the hallmarks of Gentle Giant's albums was the growth. Each album, you added new things, you took things in a different direction. Your production, got more detail, more involved, if you will, with each progressive album.
Yeah, well, that's what we wanted to do, and that's exactly what we broke the Simage Free and the Big Sound up for, because we wanted to progress as musicians, internally, and being better musicians for ourselves and for the band, and then to take it on stage and play whatever that was, and hopefully we would get an audience that would pay money, that we could put bread on the table. If that didn't happen, then we were going to be in deep shit. But thankfully,
well, yeah,
thankfully, we rehearsed and a lot. We were hard workers. I mean, we were pretty disciplined, so we rehearsed and put together 3 Friends and then Octopus, and toured. In fact, we started coming over to the States. And obviously, we toured Europe a lot before that, and we started getting a big audience, as not just a special guest slot. We started getting our own audiences, especially in Europe, at those times. And then from then on, and then if you want to do a quick, precise history, after Octopus, during that period of time, we were touring in the U.S. with Jethro Tull, actually. And Tull were fantastic for us. I mean, they were great friends, and they took us out, both in Europe and in North America, as special guests. And we developed our own audiences with Ian and the band's blessing. They gave us a lot of space, a lot of time on stage, and we thank them for that. I mean, even now I do. And then it was a period of time that at that point, that Phil, my brother, decided to leave the band, because he was having issues leaving home and his family, and it was tough for him. We were much younger and had no sort of hold, to hang out, and do 3-4 months straight on the road, which we did, by the way. It was tough for him.
I would think.
So he had to fly back occasionally, and that was rough for us, because then we were stuck in Terre Haute, Indiana, twiddling our thumbs at Holiday Inn, which no slight on Terre Haute, but
I was just going to say no aspersions, Terre Haute.
but let me tell you something. You spend a few days there in the middle of winter, when stuck at Holiday Inn, that's no fun.
No, the pool's closed.
The pool's closed, and boy, the downtown area is kind of a anyway. So that was so it became very tough for him. And anyway, he had to leave, and we had to basically close ranks and become a 5-piece, which I think was better for everyone. Actually, ultimately, it was a tough period, especially because it was mine and Ray's sibling.
Right.
But it was a tough period, but we came out of that period, and I think matured in an easier way and better way as Gentle Giant. And the album we recorded afterwards was a very kind of a dark album, and we didn't like doing it at all, because it was emotionally draining because of the situation. That was in a glass house. Mm-hmm. And then I think the band, having had that experience and certainly touring more and more, we were headlining in a lot of places. And I think the album after that was either Power and the Glory, which was, I think that was a real mature period of time for the band. We were headlining in 5,000-10,000 seaters in places, and we felt that we were on our way, if you like. And certainly, our musical direction with John and being a 5-piece and much more concise was we were, again, a band is like a life, if you like. You're born, you become a child, an adolescent, and then you're a young adult, and then you become mature, and then at some point your bones start creaking, and but your mind is still active, and then you try to put that together again. So and then there's a point where you say, well, I want to retire. I don't want to do this as much as anymore. There's a cycle there. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that was the history of the band, if you like, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, watching footage of your concerts, the thing that strikes me most was, you guys, musicianship wise, were stunning. The attention to detail, was unbelievable. But at the same time, you guys were having so much fun on stage, watching you, moving around and having a good time. I mean, it's, I wish I could have been there to experience firsthand.
Well, that's one thing, that's something that I think we wanted to convey, but it's something we felt, as opposed to, some of the other bands, I guess, that were bagged in our ilk as progressive. We took our music very seriously. I mean, we took our rehearsals very seriously. We were very, very disciplined. It wasn't like, hey, let's go jam and make and free form our, and put some riffs together. We were very, very disciplined in rehearsals on stage, but at the same time, we love to see smiles out there. We wanted to surprise people. We wanted to shock people. We wanted people to smile along with us because we love to play and we love the joy of putting it together. For us, we wanted to convey that. I mean, it wasn't wanted. That's what we did, and again, we didn't take ourselves seriously, but we took our music seriously. So we wanted the audience to feel the same way and enjoy our enjoyment, if you like. And
Right.
I hope that was the case. I think it was.
Yeah, I'm going to say, based on what I've seen, that it worked pretty well. Those shows.
Yeah, there was not too many people staring at their shoes and thinking we're
dozing off.
Dozing off, etc. Yeah, that's one thing that would not have worked.
Well, I'll tell you, we're talking about the growth from album to album. Freehand, which is considered one of the most complex recordings in all of prog rock history. What was the approach that you guys took on that? We said, okay, we've gone this far. What are we going to add to the mix to set this one apart?
I don't think it's too set apart, to tell you the truth. It's just a natural progression. I mean, we were, as I said to you, I think we were had become a mature band that had a style that, I guess, that was gentle and giant. I mean, again, you can't write this. I mean, you can't put it in bullet points and say, okay, number one, we'll do this. Number two, this is a natural progression. And having had the musicians around me, I'm very lucky to have Kerry, Ray, Gary, and John, as incredible musicians behind me as a singer, and I play bass, and sax, etc. But Freehand was a progression from, I think it was after Power and the Glory, and we were in certain respects happier because as a band we'd gotten out of certain contractual obligations that were kind of stymieing some things, certainly business-wise at that time. And so therefore, that's part of what Freehand means, is like, okay, we're not being told that we've got to do this at our pace and at our whim. So that came. So the album itself was a very inspired period of time for us because we'd gotten out of certain contractual things, and out of it came freehand, and I think it shows in the music itself. I mean, it was probably the most popular album, if you like, sales wise. Even it broke the top 40 and all over the world. For us to break the top 40 or top 30 was like unheard of. We weren't a pop band. We were this supposedly this crazy cult band. But who knows? I didn't know. I mean, I didn't get it. I mean, I still don't understand the progressive thing and why we're bagged into any kind of situation. But nevertheless, it was kind of almost a zenith of where we were as a band and as people.
Right. Now there's a new remix out of Freehand.
Yep.
Now, what's the difference is if you listen to the original LP and then you listen to the new remix, what will people hear? Differences?
Well, they'll hear the same songs, of course.
You mean you didn't put all new songs, just call it Freehand?
Yeah, well, maybe we should have actually. That was
surprise.
We like to surprise people. That would be a good idea, actually. Damn, I didn't think of that. Just put all
80 minutes of disco.
Yeah, maybe we should have remixed it or something with or something. Anyway. No, it's Stephen Wilson, who's a friend, a fan, and a good friend, has remixed three of our previous albums, and we love just his touch because he's very respectful, if you like, of the music itself, and made the it didn't. I mean, you can. It's not different, but it's when you hear it in the 5.1 surround sound or hear it even on a regular CD player, the clarity and the space between the instrumentation and the pieces of music in between is more apparent. So he puts his deft touch on something that's already done. He doesn't change anything. He doesn't put his stamp on it. He basically is respectful about the music he listens to, and gives it space and it takes the hiss out of some of the things we left in because we didn't have the capability there. So really, it's really much more clear, and I think the levels are certainly changed slightly, and you could hear the rhythm section of the drums and the snare and the kick drum a little more clear, and clarify some of the vocals in pulling back some of the things where they should be. So I think it's very good, honestly. I really think it's one of his best remixes that he's done for us. It's worth it to.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned before, Derek, that bands are kind of like they have a life cycle. Now, after you guys wrapped Gentle Giant, you wound up actually in the record business as an exec. You went to the other side. How did that come about?
Well, it came about by me needing a job, for God's sake, because otherwise I'd have been shaking a cup outside of Madison Square Garden.
We got watches.
Well, that could have been that way. Who knows? No, I don't. Well, the truth is, I was in LA, where we recorded Civilian, and I'd moved Sharon, my wife, and my daughter to Dallas, and I got a call from a friend who originally worked with me at Chrysalis Records who we were assigned to in England, and he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I've got some people had offered me to produce a couple of albums, and I didn't want to. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Honestly, I wasn't sure, but I didn't want to be stuck in a studio. I knew that, and I certainly didn't want to go back on the road. I already had 15, 16 years of it. I mean, when people think of the Gentle Giant, think, okay, that was a start. Well, as you just heard, I was 15 when I first started on the road, and we're talking about on the road doing 10 or 12 dates a week. I'm not kidding. So I knew I didn't want to do that again. And he said, "Have you ever thought about working at a record label?" I said, "Actually, no, I had never thought about that because that's almost the antithesis of you know, of what. But nevertheless, he said, "Well, look, this is we're I'm at Polygram in New York now, and it's a company that's kind of like trying to put a European base together. There were Philips in Holland and Siemens in Germany were putting this Polygram records together. Uh, there's a job open in the rock department, they called it, and this guy Jerry Jaffe would like to speak to you." I said, "Okay, well, let me come up and see what it's about." Anyway, the bottom line is, I went up there and I figured, why not? Let's give it a shot. So I got the job and I moved to New York, and I was by myself actually for 3 months in a sublet, and then I moved my family up to New York, and initially it was really initially doing promotion, but I kind of segued my way into A&R in the second year, and found my niche, if you like, and that was the second part of my musical journey, whatever that means, or career, or wherever that goes. It's so that and in the A&R level area, my first signing was a guy called John Bon Jovi, who became Bon Jovi, who became very popular. So I was,
just a little bit.
So I was, I guess I found my niche in that world too, in certain respects, and went on to, sign other bands, and at Polygram, Cinderella, Kingdom Come, I brought in Tears of Fears, Dexys. I found my sort of niche in the dark side, if you like, the Darth Vader side of the business. But and the truth is that when I first joined, I'm going to tell you the truth here. It's almost like, yes, I needed a job. I mean, I'll be honest about it. But at the same time, it was in the music business, and I also still was a musician. And I thought, okay, as a musician, I hope I can bring my experiences, if you like, to a company and be a friend to the artist rather than the suit. And I think I was able to do that, and I'm lucky in that respect, because I could see that there was not too many people in this side could relate to what a musician goes through, and there's not many musicians who can tell me you don't know what it's like, because I've been there and done that many times. I've slept on the floors or in cars or vans and been there and done everything. So there's not many stories that can say you didn't do that. So in that respect, I was lucky.
Well, it had to work well both for you, because having been there, you can tell who's really hungry and who's really got talent. But then for the artist, they also know that because you've been there, they can trust you.
Well, yeah, exactly that. And you, to be perfectly honest, you need both. When there's a lot of anyway. So as I said, John Bon Jovi, which Bon Jovi was my first signing, and he had and has still an incredible drive. I mean, his drive to make it was. It's very rare you see anyone with their the bit between their teeth, and nothing was going to stop them. And when I met him after, because we spoke, and he had this song called "Runaway," and he basically told me, "I want to be the next Elvis. I want to be bigger than Elvis." And he didn't look at me, like laughingly. He meant it. And I thought there's not too many people that could say that. He was a good-looking kid. I mean, he's and the girls would, I'm sure, would faint over him. And but there was a lot of work to be done. But nevertheless, his discipline and drive was unstoppable. and he had to learn, which he does and did, how to be a mega star. But he had to learn it, and he was very pragmatic, very very singular in his vision, and I basically helped him with a lot of things over the period of time I was at Polygram to see that vision through with getting the right producers, getting the co-writers, etc. The same went for other bands. I mean, Tom Kiefer had the same kind of vision. We had to put a new band together, but Tom wanted to be, this. He wanted to be, as big as they became. I mean, the Cinderella, that is, and other bands, had that. But you really know, you have to have the drive, ambition, and also incredible musical chops. You have to sort of have both. And occasionally things fall in the cracks, and they're the sad ones, the ones that coulda, shoulda, and that's happened as well. But for the most part, there's you need that the artist needs to have that incredible musicianship as well as a unique something unique, and be a leader and not a follower. But at the same time, you need to have the bit between your teeth, and as well as which I learned having joined the company, having had that experience, having someone in the company who is your champion. Because if you don't have the champion, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And I realized that when again, you asked me, about joining the dark side, if you like, and I went, when I met my friend Dan, who invited me up to meet the people at the company. I went from office to office, and I thought, holy shit, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Every office had their own agenda. Every office had their own. Every person was a president in the company, and my heart sank. But nevertheless, I said, okay, now I know what it is, and now I know what it is why General Giant never made it. But nevertheless, but my heart sank. But at the same time, I said to myself that, okay, if I can give some of what I've experienced to an artist, and know that that's what goes on inside the company, I can make them successful at the same time, make myself, at least give myself a living wage that can have my family be able to eat and have a roof over their heads.
Right. Exactly. Well, not only did you sign new bands, but you were instrumental in revitalizing, if you will, or creating a comeback of sorts for AC/DC.
Yep, I worked with them.
With the Razor's Edge.
Yep, I took them under my wing because Atlantic was, to tell you the truth, going to drop them. And so after Polygram, I got an offer to run a major company, record label, and that's something I wanted to do. And it's something that, it's almost like to look back, I don't regret it, but it's be careful what you wish for, because it was fantastic. The first few years were great. Honestly, it was we had I signed Pantera, and they were superb, and they just blew me away. And I was really fortunate that they became probably the most very very influential in that world. I signed Dream Theater. I mean, new bands, as well as working with bands that kind of like were going on the sort of downward decline, and Atlantic Records, which were part of the Warner Music Group, were thinking of dropping them, and I said, I'll take them on. I'll trade you. I think it was on the roster at that point was Pete Townsend. And I said, look, you work with Pete, and I'll work with the guys at AC/DC. So, I got together with Angus and Malcolm, and the good thing about my situation was that they knew me as a musician because their brother, young, I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, what is his name?
Yeah, him.
Yeah, him and the Easy Beats, because we played with them. Knew me, and they said you could. And he told them they could trust me. So I got them. I got them together, and I put them together with Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock in Vancouver, and I wrote The Razor's Edge with Thunderstruck and everything, and that album became massive. So I was, and I was probably one. I think from what I understood, and they told me, I was probably one of the very, very few record company suits, if you like, that was allowed to go in the studio when they were doing an album, because again, they trusted me as a musician, and I hope they still do. So yeah, it was fantastic being involved with them, being involved with even Bad Company, who had a new singer, and revitalizing them with a new singer and having big hits with them, as well as having Dream Theater and Pantera and other bands during that ATCO period of time. So it was a lot of fun for the most part. Towards the end, it wasn't, because I was realizing that I was doing a lot more meetings corporately and starting to lose myself musically, and that's when I said to the people at Warner Music that I don't want to do it anymore. And they were just like saying, "What are you talking about?" I mean, I'm president, CEO of a very successful company. But I realized, I looked at myself in the mirror a couple of times when I went, several times, not a couple, and saw myself wearing a suit and going into meetings, talking about band X equals in 2 or 3 years are going to sell 300,000, band Y, and I realized that I was speaking about band X and band Y that could have been Gentle Giant or Simon Dupree. And it was very depressing, actually. And having had that experience, I said, I was losing myself to the business and forgetting what I got myself into, this world for, which is about music.
Right.
So I said, I'm not doing this anymore. So and they kept me under contract for another year and a half, but nevertheless, I couldn't sit around in board meetings talking about band X and band Y, and forgetting
the music.
who was the music and musicians. And I was losing myself to that, and I had to stop myself. It was a tough period for me, honestly, but nevertheless, it was the right thing to do.
Well, you got to see all the good things, but then also all the things that, gives the business the reputation that it has.
Well, yes, to a degree I did. And that's why I said, I'm not going to do this. However, having run a company and been fairly successful, I got an offer to run another company, which is an independent company, not stymied by the corporate world, with a company called Roadrunner Records. And that was owned by a guy called Case Vessels in Holland. And it was basically initially a death metal label down in Soho, New York, that dealt with these bands with so many tattoos you couldn't even see their skin, and so many piercings you didn't know if they'd burn up in an MRI. But and he said, could you come in and build this company to be a major company? And I said, I'm not sure, but I've run other companies successfully. So I took a year to sort of get myself acclimatized to the company, and became the president and CEO of Roadrunner after ATCO, and effectively helped build it to become a major player. In fact, making moves to get out of certain kinds of music. I went in there and I saw that these young girls and guys were really living the lifestyle of rock. I mean, these are real rock oriented kids who would work day and night for the artists, and that was fantastic. But at the same time, the owner thought to expand his universe. He signed pop artists and signed hip hop artists and other companies, and he was wasting his time. So I'd spent a year kind of like saying, you have to, this is not what this company is. The company has this love of rock music, and these kids who you've hired, they don't get the other stuff. So I had to sort of move out of certain things and get rid of certain labels, and then focus on what we could do best. I mean, you really
Right.
not multitask, just do one thing that you could do best. And I was fortunate that I was able to focus with the team on board on being the best rock label out there. And we were lucky in that we had a couple of pretty big hits with the bands already signed, like Fear Factory and Typo Negative. And then we signed signed Slipknot, which was a big turning point for the label. It was, they were gigantic, and it came in at number one, and it was like it expanded the universe of the company a huge amount. And I realized then that this company could be much bigger than even a rock label. And I hired a couple of people to break it into the mainstream. And we signed Nickelback, which, people laugh at, Nickelback. Well, you know what? Nickelback was an unbelievable success. I mean, for the company, it would, How You Remind Me, you couldn't get a bigger song and album than Sunny Side Up.
Mm-hmm.
And it broke the label through to a big mass appeal company. So that was, and then at that point, Case, who was the owner at that point, how can I put this? Extended himself a little too much overseas, and had, there was because Nickelback was so big, wanted more of the same. And bands like Nickelback, if you like, and bands who have these kind of breakthroughs, they don't come every week. They don't even come every year. These kind of songs, which are breakthrough songs, and How You Remind Me was a breakthrough song, only come along once every 5 years. And we were spending money, which was insane amounts for bands that were not going to break through. So the bottom line is, that was, we came to an understanding that I couldn't. It stymied the cash flow, and he had to sell the company. And so I basically said, look, I'm not going to be. This is it for me. I'm done for that part of my part of the dark side. I'll continue now and consulting and overseeing whatever I do now, which I've learned, and that's what I continue to do after that.
Yeah. Tell me this, Derek, when you were signing new bands, did you have to like the music of the band, or would you, even if maybe the music wasn't, your taste per se, but you could see this is going to be big? Did it matter whether you liked them or not?
Well, I had to like the guys. I had to like the people. That's very important to me, and I had to like their drive and their ambition. Did I love No, I had to know what we did. You have to know what you do best and what you're best at. I mean, not just you, the people you're working with and the team. So there's elements of I had to, I knew that something could be big because it had the elements of what was happening at that time, and the artists themselves were doing something, which was relevant for the period. But for the most part, I would say the biggest bands I signed were bands that I loved. I mean, I think Pantera. I just remember going to see Pantera, and in this club in Arlington, Texas, and I was one of 30 people there, and I saw them at Polygram. I heard about them in Polygram, and I said, please wait until I come to ATCO, because I really am interested in signing the band. They no one was interested in this band, and I went down there, as the head of a company, and kind of like I stood in the back with my arms folded. Okay, let's see if you're, and they played in front of 30 or 40 people. By the time the third song was done, I was almost, but I never did it, jumping in the mosh pit. I became a complete and utter fan. I mean, they were just like beyond. They were superb. So you're talking about certain things. I was a complete fan of this band. Just I love them, and knew that they were going to make it, because if someone, an old fart like me who was running a company, as as an executive, if you like, could feel that feeling. There's no way that anyone else would not feel that feeling of sheer anger, joy, music, etc., etc. And they were going to make it. I just knew it. So there's two sides to this.
Yeah. To tell me this, given how many, divergent, we'll say, your journey has been, people know you from, all aspects, whether it be Simon Dupree or Gentle Giant or you, the record, guy. What's one of the things that has surprised you most when people know you will come up to you and go, "Hey, I know you from such and such," that you wouldn't expect that person to know you from?
Very interesting question. Here we are talking about all sorts of things here, and all I can tell you is that I've done a lot. I've been around a long time, but the most important thing that people talk to me about, and I think the most important thing for me is the music, my music, the being a musician. That's key to my existence. All of the other stuff I just mentioned, being in a suit and running companies and this, that, and the other, and playing in front of, but being a musician and being authentic and true to yourself as a musician, that's my legacy, I hope. And when I reflect and we talk about whatever life, I don't know if I can continue with it for a few more years. It's about the music. It's about me and the music and nothing else.
Absolutely. Well, tell me this, as far as, do you have people that will come up to you and say, "Hey, Gentle Giant had a big influence on me," but other recording artists?
Unbelievably so. And that's the weirdest and most bizarre thing that I'm finding out. That again, in Gentle Giant, we didn't think about, boy, I hope we're influential in 40 years. God, I hope we're the most important. No, we just did it because we love doing it. But interestingly enough, the world of hip hop, if you like, has become our biggest advocates, if you like, in certain respects, and become the most progressive, using that term, progressive artists in certain ways, because they've used some of our riffs, if you like, in a very clever and unique ways, and that world has become a very they've embraced a lot of progressive bands because their love of interesting music is different to the mainstream. It's not TikTok. It's not Spotify. It's about finding little bits and pieces and putting it into a world which is their world, which is something they live, and that's the interesting thing. And I've got to know that world fairly well because we had I've got a gold record on the wall from Run the Jewels, who had a song called Legend Has It that sampled Knots from Octopus. And when I went to see them backstage, and they were huge fans of the band, and I was, "How do you know Gentle? What are you talking about?" And they said, "No, we just love your music." And that's like, what? And the same thing. I've told this story several times. Again, I don't want to be redundant, but I'm running a company called Frontiers Records from Italy, and I had to work with Ann Wilson of Heart, and she's great. And I had to bring her backstage at the Tonight Show for Jimmy Fallon. But it was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I took her backstage. She was doing a guest spot with the Roots guys, and the musical director just was getting things ready and said, "Just a reference point, are you the Derek Shulman that was in Gentle Giant?" I said, "Yeah." How do you know? He said, "Hold on 1 second," and like within 3 minutes, the whole band came out. Questlove and the Roots came out,
Wow.
and and here's Ann Wilson next to me, and they were looking at me and they were doing to me, "We're not worthy," in front of me, and asking for my autograph. I mean, and Amir Questlove would say, "Man, I'd love to work with you on the route, on some stems." And I was, I was embarrassed as well as being shocked and gratified that they knew. I mean, how do they know me? But they were fans of Gentle Giant. It's just interesting that this world is embracing music like Gentle Giants and King Crimsons and other bands like of our ilk. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, Derek, we're that sounds like a pretty good note to wrap this episode up on.
It's a great note. And again, what I said earlier about what is important and what hasn't been, what I've learned over this period of time talking about freehand and everything else is it's about music, and it's about music and being authentic and being yourself. And if you don't have all those things, it's not about the business. It's not about social media. It's not about your views and likes and everything else. It's about you and authenticity and about the great music you put together. If you've got that, then you've got a real shot.
Absolutely. It all comes down to the music.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, the imitation stuff doesn't last.
For a minute, but that's all it is in the big scheme of things.
Exactly. So, and see, here we are, like you said, all these years later, talking about Gentle Giant. So obviously there's something there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy about that.
So, all right. Well, tell you what, on that note, we're going to bring this edition of Music Night to the Majestic to a close. I want to thank everybody for watching. Derek, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us.
My pleasure. Nice to speak to you, Michael.
All right, everybody, have a good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.